Eric's camera, I know.
Right.
Which one is it? Yours?
Ours is straight ahead.
Can you introduce yourselves? You don't
You
mind.
just go around, go ahead.
I'm Katie Nixon with the Daily Kent Stater.
Video what?
Daily Kent Stater.
Student newspaper.
Daily State, okay.
I'm Jeremy Noble. I'm with the Record-Courier,
Which is?
the paper covering Kent and Ravenna and Portage County.
Kabir Bhatia, I'm with WKSU Radio. It's the NPR affiliate here
NPR
of Northeast Ohio.
oh yeah.
Stephanie Ramirez with Channel 5, that is the ABC affiliate in Cleveland.
John Javon, I'm videographer, University Communications and Marketing here at Kent State.
I'm Dustin Lee. I'm one of the other videographers with the same department.
Robert Lucas with Record Publishing. With Record Publishing.
He goes with him.
Yes.
Local newspaper.
Jeff Glidden, university photographer here at Kent State.
Bill Hughes, I'm with TV2, the student television.
TV what news?
2.
Two. And you?
I'm Bob Burford. I work at Kent State University with Eric and Emily.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
And you?
Greg Saber, CBS Radio.
Radio. And you, is this one of yours?
Yep.
Thank you for coming. I'm Oliver Stone, and glad to be here today. Are you all, any of you going to come back for the remarks?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nearly everyone, I think.
Because I mean, I don't want to repeat myself sometimes when I may say some things, but I can maybe, you know, there's sort of, why don't we just see where this goes in the next 15 minutes?
We have limited time, guys, but if you would just.
Well, that's, the point is, if you can see, if you're gonna be able to get a shot of me saying things, sometimes it might be clearer than my trying to stumble and explain it here in this impromptu session, because we don't have time.
Your overall reaction to what you saw?
Oh, I think it's very powerful and very necessary to have a memorial to that time and that, also that particular incident, which is one of many in a cascade of incidents and deaths brought on by two administrations that were intractable when it came to Vietnam.
And through the years, have you formed an opinion, and after what you saw here, who bears
At
responsibility?
the time, I was a numbed out, alienated U.S. infantry soldier back in New York City. I was at NYU Film School. We protest, the school shut down, the film school. I can't talk for the whole university because of my memory, but the film school was shut down in protest. And Marty Scorsese was one of my teachers, and he was organizing. We were organizing in the streets of New York. We were sending out documentary crews to shoot the protests all across Central Park, and especially in Wall Street, where there was construction workers were fighting with the protesters on Wall Street. And it was an interesting moment because I found out later in time that Nixon and his group had organized the construction workers to go after the protesters. We ended up losing, I believe, 2 cameras they were smashed by the Wall Street guys. Smashed. They were tough. I mean, there was a lot of anger. And construction workers were lined up by Nixon to support him. It was part of his moral majority campaign. So the film school took a big hit there, and the school was pretty much, I think the teachers did not come in for all that month, and we ended up making a documentary that was shown called Street Scenes 1970. I was one of the cameramen. It was shown at the New York Film Festival in, I think, 1971.
So in your opinion, was this murder here in 1970?
I had no idea. I had no political position back then. I had no ideology. The war to me had been just, it was something that had not gone well. It was something that was ugly to see, but I was raised as a conservative. I was raised a Goldwater supporter. I was raised by my father in New York, a Republican. So, put it this way, I had very divided loyalties at that point in time. But what I'd seen with my own eyes had shaken me. But it was not until later, through the 1970s, talking to people, I was slow coming around to realizing the geopolitical arguments. And, look, I came a long way from being what I had been in my thinking. I was one of those people who, felt like we were fighting communism, and we had to buckle up and be tough about it.
Is this your first visit to Kent?
So I did not know the circumstances of that shooting, and I didn't understand it. It wasn't revealed at the time that there was, as I remember, it was the kids were acting, as I remember the story was that the kids were acting in a very rowdy manner and so forth, and perhaps there had been some violence that was suggested by the Nixon people and the Ohio people. So, but I couldn't make head or tail of it.
Is this your first visit to Kent?
To Kent State, yes,
And did you do any preparation or research before you came?
a little.
What did you do?
You will see the result of that in my remarks tonight. I don't want to reveal everything I'm going to say, but I feel strongly that things have to be said. In view of the fact that you realize I've been working for the last 5 years on Untold History of the United States, which deals with our history. In the Showtime series, it's 10 hours going back to World War II. So in that sweep of events from World War II to 2013 up to now, of course, the protests of the 1970s play a huge role. And so Kent State is one of those things that happened that really made a difference, was a game changer also in the protests against the war. The series is now on Showtime, and it's coming out in DVD from Time Warner in October 22 of this year. It'll be a 12-hour package at that point, not 10 hours. It'll include the entire series as we did it from World War I, from the Spanish-American War, 1899 to 2013.
Mr. Stone, not being directly involved with the Kent State shootings, what made you decide to be a part of the commencement today?
I was invited, frankly, by the Kent Memorial at a few months ago. People I talked to told me that it was a good thing to do. It would bring attention to the fact that there's this new a museum memory of what those young people lost their lives about. And memory about that war, the Vietnam War, is essential to understanding our position in the world today. As you know, there was a concerted effort by the Reagan administration, by the two Bush administrations, and by Clinton and by Obama, to forget the legacy of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam Syndrome, as it was called by Reagan, was thankfully, and said by Bush, was thankfully buried in the sands of Arabia after the Kuwait invasion. So that's what the official story is, and frankly, in the history books that my children are reading, I see a mention of the contention and the dissension, but I'm not so sure that I see some of the dirty story, the dirty politics that was going on behind the scenes during the Nixon and Lyndon Johnson administrations. It's very important to keep in mind that massive files were kept on subversives, protesters, student activists, and there was always a feeling that Hoover always had it, and Johnson definitely stated it. I'm not sure that Nixon believed it, but he said it. There was definitely the feeling that the communism was influencing the civil rights movement since way back, and was influencing the student protest movement. So Johnson, when the first violent protest started to happen at Madison, Wisconsin, in October 1967, there's a wonderful documentary about that. Madison has a long tradition of progressive history, politics, and those students took it to the authorities, and there was violence, and that set the tone for what was going to happen here at Kent State 3 years later.
What were you looking for in the footage that you were reviewing in the exhibit earlier?
Oh, I was curious. As an infantryman, I'm always curious about how the order to fire was given or not given, how the soldiers looked when they fired. It's ironic that not all of them were firing, that some of them are holding back. It seems pretty sloppy. At the same time, given the fact that they were kneeling almost 3-4 minutes before, it seems very strange that because they were in a kneeling position aiming, and then what happened afterward is where they don't kneel, they just turn and fire, is certainly indicative to me of what I saw in Vietnam, which is built up frustration and built up anger. And I see the reactions of a lot of the National Guardsmen afterward. These kids deserved it. One guardsman called them pigs, these 4 pigs. deserve what they got. They've been giving us shit for 4 days, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And the reactions of the town citizens, it's quite strong stuff. And it's very important for kids to see this, for a new generation to understand the anger on both sides. The polarization that we now have that's supposedly in our country is evident here, quite evident. And I want to, in my remarks tonight, I want to refer to the climate of the time, to give the young people, I hope, a memory of what it was like to be in this country in 1970.
You mentioned that you did a little bit of research before you came to Kent State
Yeah.
today. In doing your tours and going through the visitor center, did you happen to learn anything new, see or hear anything that you hadn't before?
As I said, you know, the actual, when you stand on the slope and you see the distance down to the parking lot, there was no need to, it seems to me very clearly as an infantryman, there was no need to fire. It seems that the need to fire came from built up anger and frustration. And the kids were throwing rocks, throwing tear gas canisters back. They were simply not going to give in to this, they were simply not going to give in to this use of force. Now, what's legal and not legal is certainly a big issue, but when you shoot people down and say they were not obeying the law, it's still a huge moral violation to me of what danger were these soldiers truly in. And the general who gave the order, who may have given the order, General Canterbury, you have to wonder, is he mad? What was he thinking? If he'd had any combat experience, he would have cooled it and been calmer. You know, let the kids live and let live. There was definitely a standoff, but this was going on all across the country. Now, what shocks me even, I mean, I can understand how they can lose it and blow these 13 kids down, but what's even more shocking to me is this aftermath where the professor runs around and supposedly they're given a few minutes to evacuate, and the professor is screaming, "They will slaughter you! They will slaughter you!" I don't believe that the men in the National Guard would have done that, but who knows? You know, this is a very interesting moment. I mean, if they had taken a Martin Luther King approach or a Gandhi approach, because Martin Luther King was confronted with so many similar situations in the civil rights movement where, you know, Southern marshals were really pushing the limits of violence. And as you know, the civil rights workers had all kinds of training in resisting pressure and linking their arms, chanting, singing, being cool and under pressure. But these kids did not have that kind of training. But they didn't want to leave. And for this, I would say, repeat, this madman, Canterbury, to make these kind of threats to the professors and say, you know, that we're gonna do something about this. We're gonna. Did he use the word slaughter? I don't remember. I remember hearing an audio. I think he may have.
I'm
used,
begging you, he says. Please, that part?
Well, somebody's begging him, but he's like saying, "Get him out of here."
Right.
And he's, or the, you know, or we're gonna do something. I forget if he said so, but it's clear that he is threatening ultimate violence against people who are sitting down. Even in India, the British troops at their worst would not fire on protesters like that. So it seems to have been a complete breakdown of training in the National Guard, and for them to commend those guys to well, anyway, that's another issue.
We got time for about one more question, and make sure the student newspaper gets to ask one. So go ahead.
Having served in the Vietnam War, how does this incident, May 4th, how does that resonate with you?
Well, you know, it resonates as one of many. I'm glad the protesters, this is all from my hindsight now, this is not my speaking in 1970, you understand. I'm glad the protesters protested. I'm glad they had a conscience. I'm glad the students of America, not just the, as Nixon called them, the bums, but normal-looking Midwestern students were able to express their outrage at this war, which was immoral. The slaughter was enormous beyond all proportions to what we knew at the time. You know, 3.8 million Vietnamese, according to McNamara, were killed. Probably 1 million Cambodians and Laotians. That's about 4.8. how many people were killed in the Holocaust in World War II? Do people know?
6-7 million.
6 million. Everyone in America knows. You talk to a high school, 6 million. How many people were killed in Vietnam? You tell it to a high school? The answer? I don't know. A couple 100,000, 1 million. 5 million Indo-Chinese died in a war that was perpetuated by the military-industrial complex in a civil war that was fought between two sides. That basically, the North was clearly going to be triumphant from 1950s on. From the 1940s on, the North was going to be triumphant because they were fighting for Vietnamese nationalism and independence. We should not have been involved. But be that as it may, these 4 kids, doesn't sound like a lot compared to 5 million, but these 4 kids meant a lot to the conscience of this country. They died for a reason, a sacrifice, and that has to be remembered. Because if you say that no one's responsible and it was just a misunderstanding, it's an insult to their memory.
Thank you, everybody.
Any Kent State movie coming?
Speaks in 7:30.
No, I can't make them all, as I said today.
That was a good line to Michael Heaton.
Yeah. What do you?
Yeah.
So many.
Hey, man.
I get approached by so many different. It's an honor to be approached by. But I learn a lot. I learn much more about it, everything. And anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You can just sit tight for a second. Are you tired?
I'm good. Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna give you that panel.
Hey guys, if you want to grab
That's
water
all right.
on your way out, you're welcome to.
Behind you there. Thank you very much.